Space bent like glass under pressure, and then it cracked. The alien ship didn't arrive with sound or light. It appeared as if the blackness of space had birthed something ancient and impossible. It was larger than anything humanity had ever seen, almost the size of a small moon, shaped like a crescent blade, and carved with glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. It drifted past Neptune, silent and still, but every sensor on Earth screamed as it did. Electromagnetic waves twisted. Communications scrambled. Pilots vomited in mid-flight. Astronauts aboard the orbital station passed out. And through it all, the psychic pressure poured out, raw, invisible, terrifying. Like something was reaching into humanity's mind and pressing down, testing for weakness. On Earth, the United Terran Council convened an emergency session. Faces were pale. Words were sharp. Panic barely hid behind suits and silence. No one knew what the alien ship wanted. It hadn't spoken. It hadn't attacked. It simply was. They tried everything. Radio, light signals, even bursts of math-based pulses. Nothing worked. Then the message came. Not in words, but in a single thought, pressed into the minds of all aboard Earth's moon base. Send your strongest. One may approach. Most saw it as a trap. Others saw it as a challenge. Only one man saw it as an invitation. Commander Eric Thorson, callsign THOR, stood at the edge of the command room with his arms crossed. Tall, broad, and battle-tested, he looked more like a myth than a man. The kind of guy you didn't argue with, you just made room for him to walk through. He stepped forward, calm as a glacier, and said, "I'll go." The room went quiet. Admiral Serrano, pale and stiff, tried to argue. "We don't know what's on that ship. That thing is 8 feet tall, minimum. It's not just alien. It's a whole new category of dangerous." THOR smiled. Not a grin, not smug, just the kind of smile that came from someone who'd faced death before, and shook its hand. All the more reason someone with guts should go. There was no vote, no debate. When THOR spoke like that, people listened. Within an hour, THOR suited up in the diplomatic-class EVA armor, sleek, silver-gray, lined with neural interfaces and emergency systems. A single shuttle, small and fast, launched from the moon base and crossed the stars to the alien vessel. As he approached, the alien ship responded. A glowing panel opened near its side, like a door made of starlight. The message was clear. Enter. No weapons, no backup, no guarantees. THOR stood at the edge of the unknown, the stars behind him, the alien doorway ahead. He took one breath, calm and deep, then walked inside. The chamber was massive. Warm light shimmered across the walls like sunlight through water. And there, at the far end, stood the alien. It was tall, 8 feet at least. Its skin was dark and smooth, like living obsidian. Eyes like burning coals stared down at him. Muscles rippled beneath its armor. A blade hung at its side, not raised, just there. The alien took one step forward. THOR didn't flinch. He met the creature's eyes and nodded once, slow and steady. "I'm here," he said. "Now what?" And so the first meeting between human and Iskari began. Not with fear, not with war, but with THOR. The alien didn't speak. It didn't need to. It stared at THOR like a mountain deciding whether to crush the man standing before it. Tall and thick with armor, the creature's body moved with the weight of a predator, but it made no attack. Instead, it circled him slowly, like a general inspecting a new recruit. THOR stood still, eyes locked on the aliens, not aggressive, not submissive, just steady, solid. He'd seen warlords try to intimidate him before. Pirates, raiders, mercenaries. This thing, just another first impression. A big one, sure. But THOR had never been small where it counted. The alien finally stopped in front of him, barely 2 feet away. Its eyes burned like twin red suns. Then it moved. Fast. Its hand flew up, not to strike, but to point at the floor. A glowing circle lit up beneath them, pulsing with blue energy. A second later, a low hum filled the air. The walls shifted. The chamber began to rotate. Suddenly, it wasn't just a room. It was an arena. A row of massive armored aliens stepped out of the shadows along the walls, each one towering and armed with strange, blunt weapons. They watched silently. THOR's suit chirped. His eye whispered in his ear. Warning. Ritual combat structure detected. Non-lethal parameters active. You may be tested. THOR cracked his neck. So this is the handshake, huh? The main alien, its name unknown to him, but later he'd learn it was Valkar, stepped back and drew its blade. It didn't swing. It planted the blade into the ground with a deep metallic thud. A gesture of respect. Then it reached out and offered a weapon of its own. A heavy staff, dark metal with light running through its seams. THOR took it. The moment his fingers closed around the grip, the crowd of alien warriors pounded their chests once in unison. A sound like thunder rolled through the arena. The duel had begun. Valkar attacked first, a wide sweep that came fast. Far too fast for something that size. THOR ducked, slid under, and rolled to the side. He didn't strike back yet. He wanted to understand the rhythm. The rules. Another swing. Another dodge. Then a sharp jab. Valkar aimed for his chest. THOR twisted, let it glance off his armor, and used the momentum to spin behind his opponent. He struck the back of the alien's leg, hard. Not enough to injure. Just enough to say, I'm not afraid of you. Valkar turned slowly. For the first time, its face twitched. If aliens could smirk, this one just did. The fight continued. 5 minutes of hard, fast, bone-rattling exchanges. But it wasn't wild. It was structured. Like a dance, a test, a conversation without words. And THOR. He passed with flying colors. When the final blow came, a deadlock where both weapons met in a crash of sparks, Valkar stepped back, lowered its weapon, and raised one closed fist to its chest. The crowd responded the same way. THOR mirrored the gesture, one fist to his chest. A long silence followed. Then a deep voice, translated through the suit's systems, spoke for the first time. You are seen. The duel was over. The ritual complete. THOR had not just survived. He had been accepted. Not as prey, not as a problem. As equal. And in that moment, something ancient shifted in the stars. THOR stood in the center of the alien chamber, sweat dripping down his face, breathing heavy, but still steady. The Iskari warriors around him murmured in low guttural tones. They were bigger than him, stronger than him, but THOR had one thing they didn't. Grit. He wiped his brow, his fingers leaving streaks of blood on the suit's visor. His body ached from the brutal contest with Valkar. The alien had proven itself a formidable foe, but it wasn't just about combat anymore. It was about the trial. Valkar had set the terms. Prove your strength, your resolve, and your mind. Not just in battle, but in endurance, in survival. The trial wasn't over yet, and it was only getting worse. A deep rumble vibrated through the floor, and the arena lights flickered, dimming for a moment. A loud click echoed through the air, followed by the hiss of doors opening on either side of the chamber. THOR tensed. He had trained for every kind of combat. He had survived the worst humanity could throw at him. But this was unlike anything he'd ever faced. Out of the darkness emerged two colossal beasts, feral and savage, with scales as hard as rock, claws that could rip through armor, and jaws lined with rows of teeth that could snap a man in half. The creatures growled low, their eyes glowing with a sickly yellow hue. One was twice as tall as THOR. The other was just as massive, its body thick with muscle and armor plates, shifting with a low hum. The warriors watching began chanting. deep, rhythmic, a sign of approval, or maybe anticipation. It didn't matter. The trial had begun. Thor didn't wait for the creatures to make the first move. He couldn't. He was alone in this arena, surrounded by hostile aliens, and he was being tested, not just as a soldier, but as a leader. With a grunt, THOR grabbed the heavy staff Valkar had given him earlier, now glowing with a faint blue energy, and turned to face the creatures. They were closing in, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. The first beast lunged with terrifying speed. Thor sidestepped just in time, his body moving like a coiled spring, the staff crashing into the side of the creature's ribcage. There was a sickening crack, but the beast barely flinched. It hissed in fury and swiped its claws across the air, aiming for Thor's face. He ducked, the claws missing by inches, and he countered with a swift thrust of his weapon, hitting the beast's side. It howled, its scales giving off a strange electric pulse that shocked THOR's hands, but he didn't let go. The creature stumbled backward. But just as THOR thought he might have a moment of respite, the second beast attacked. Faster than its twin, it leaped, jaws open wide, aiming for his throat. THOR twisted at the last second, the jaws snapping shut right next to him. He rolled to the side, his heart pounding as the creature crashed into the stone floor. "Not today," THOR muttered under his breath. He didn't have time for mistakes. With a roar, he charged, taking the fight straight to the beast. The staff crackled with energy as he swung it, driving it into the creature's skull with all the force he could muster. It screamed, staggered back, and dropped to the ground, stunned, but not dead. The fight wasn't over. THOR's breathing was ragged, his muscles burning, but he wasn't going to stop. Not now. He had to finish this, prove he belonged here, in the heart of this ancient trial. With one last push, he drove the staff through the creature's neck, silencing it forever. The first beast turned toward him, snarling, but THOR was ready. He'd already seen how the creatures fought. He knew their patterns. He knew their weaknesses. He struck, once, twice, 3 times, until the beast collapsed with a final, deafening roar. The arena fell silent. The Iskari warriors watched, their eyes wide, their chants dying down. THOR stood over the beasts, breathing heavily, but unbroken. He hadn't just survived. He had won. The crowd was still. Then, slowly, they began to clap. Quiet at first, then louder, until the sound echoed through the chamber. Valkar stepped forward, his voice low, but full of respect. "You are worthy." The stars outside the Iskari ship glimmered like shards of glass, sharp and endless. Inside, THOR stood before the alien council, his chest still heaving from the trial. The room was cold, too cold for comfort. But THOR had learned to ignore discomfort. He had no choice. Valkar, towering and regal, stood beside him, the scars of battle still visible across its armored body. The alien's red eyes fixed on THOR, piercing and calculating, as if weighing him against some invisible scale of ancient tradition. "You are a dangerous man." Valkar spoke, its voice like thunder, but with a hint of respect. THOR met its gaze without flinching. "Dangerous or not, I'm still the only one standing between you and war." He didn't want to sound cocky, but there was no time for modesty. The Iskari's ancient code was clear. Failure to impress could result in immediate destruction, or worse, subjugation. The council around them rumbled softly, their voices like the grinding of stones. They were discussing the fate of Earth, his home. Each word was heavy, like the weight of 1,000 battles. He could feel the tension building, the silence pressing in on him from all sides. Valkar finally spoke again, this time louder, more deliberate. "The prophecy speaks of the Ashen Flame, a being who will end the Iskari dominion. Some say it is a warrior who will challenge us in combat. Others believe it will be a race of humans." THOR's heart clenched, but he remained calm. He had heard the whispers, the rumors, the ancient fears that the Iskari held about humanity. Fears that one day the Terrans would rise, and that their rise would lead to the destruction of everything the Iskari had built. Ashen flame, THOR repeated quietly. You think that's me? He couldn't hide the skepticism in his voice. Velkar nodded once, slowly. The ashen flame is not just a warrior, but a harbinger. Humanity's potential is unknown. Perhaps it is you. Perhaps it is your kind. The words were heavy, too heavy. THOR couldn't help but feel the weight of the entire universe pressing down on him. If he failed here, if he couldn't prove that humanity was more than just a potential threat, Earth would become a footnote in the galaxy's dark history. A war would begin, and billions would die. Before he could respond, a high-pitched alarm blared across the ship. The lights flashed red, bathing the room in an urgent blood-red hue. Incoming attack. A voice shouted through the comm system. A rogue faction has launched a preemptive strike against our fleet. We are under attack from a human force. THOR's pulse raced. He knew what this meant. The whispers of dissent, of betrayal within humanity's ranks. It wasn't just paranoia. Some faction within Earth's government, had decided that diplomacy wasn't the answer. They had attacked the Iskari. The council around him exploded into movement. Velkar turned to THOR, its voice hard. This is your doing, Terran. Your people seek war with us. THOR's mind raced. There was no time to explain. There was no time for anything. He needed to act. This isn't my doing, THOR said, his voice low but firm. And I'm the only one who can stop it. Without waiting for permission, he turned and sprinted for the nearest airlock. The alien warriors didn't stop him. Part of him wondered if they even could, but they certainly didn't look pleased. As THOR boarded the nearest shuttle, his comm device crackled with a transmission from Earth. It was garbled, but the voice was unmistakable. Commander Thorson, the voice said, breathless and desperate. We've made a mistake. The attack, it's a rogue faction. They're going to provoke the Iskari. You're our only hope. Please, stop them. THOR clenched his fists, his resolve hardening like steel. He wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival anymore. He was fighting for humanity's future. He slammed the shuttle's controls, sending it shooting through the blackness of space toward the rogue faction's hidden base. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. It was personal. The shuttle screamed through space, its engines burning hot as THOR pushed it to its limits. The rogue faction's hidden base, a blackened fortress wedged between two asteroids, loomed ahead like a vengeful titan, silent, jagged, and deadly. THOR gritted his teeth. His mind raced through every scenario, every possible outcome. If the rogue faction's attack was successful, if they ignited full-scale war with the Iskari, humanity would burn. There would be no coming back from that. His comms crackled to life. It was Admiral Serrano, the voice tight with urgency. THOR, you have to stop them before they launch a full assault. We can't control them. If you're wrong about this, if they're really too far gone, there's no negotiating with the Iskari. THOR didn't respond right away. There was no time for reassurance, no time for debates. He knew what was at stake, and he knew the Iskari weren't a race that would just forgive an attack. The shuttle's exterior sensors pinged. The asteroid base was shielded, and the cloaking technology kept it off the radar, but not for long. THOR's mind snapped into focus. He could see it, feel it, the cold, calculating logic of the situation. If he didn't take this base down, the Iskari would obliterate it, and everyone inside, including the humans. He had to move fast. He had to think faster. The shuttle dropped into the asteroid field, skimming the surface to avoid detection. THOR's suit was already cinched to the shuttle's weapon systems. His fingers twitched, ready to fire. But there was a problem. The base was fortified, not just with weapons, but with people. People who were once part of Earth's military. Human soldiers who now believed that fighting the Iskari was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. Thor knew he couldn't kill them all. He had to find another way. As he neared the base's outer perimeter, a sudden burst of fire from a hidden turret lit up the dark space like a star exploding. Thor threw the shuttle into a hard roll, dodging the blasts, his heart pounding as the near misses rattled the ship's hull. "Damn it," Thor muttered, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't going to let this end in a firefight, not with his people on the line. He set the shuttle down on a hidden ledge just outside the base's main docking bay. The ground was littered with abandoned mining equipment and broken drones. It looked abandoned, but Thor knew better. Cautiously, he unstrapped himself from his seat, grabbing his weapon, an Iskari pulse blade. It was a delicate piece of technology, but deadly in the right hands. He had learned quickly how to wield it during his trial with Valkar, and now it felt like an extension of his body. He didn't take a moment to gather his thoughts. No time for hesitation. The airlock slid open with a hiss. The base's cold, sterile air hit him, and for a moment, Thor was hit with the overwhelming silence. A silence broken only by the occasional hum of distant machinery. His boots made no sound as he moved swiftly, blending into the shadows. Ahead, the faint hum of voices drifted through a narrow corridor. He caught sight of figures, soldiers, human soldiers, armed and ready to fight anyone who dared challenge them. Thor's heart ached, but he didn't falter. He wasn't here to destroy his own people. He was here to save them. He approached, ducking low, the pulse blade ready in his hand. As he rounded the corner, he saw them. A small group of soldiers gathered around a holographic table, strategizing. The leader, a tall man with dark eyes, looked up sharply when THOR stepped into view. "Who the hell are you?" The leader growled, hand twitching toward his sidearm. "This is our fight now, Terran. Stay out of it." THOR's eyes locked on the man's. "I'm the one who's going to stop this war before it starts." The tension was thick, palpable. The room felt like a ticking bomb. "We don't need peace," the soldier spat. "We need to strike first. They're too dangerous. The Iskari can't be trusted." THOR stood tall, unwavering. "I am the one who'll decide if they're a threat to us, not you." The moment stretched, suspended in time. The leader hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. The others followed suit. The air felt a little less charged, but THOR knew this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The tension in the room hung like a storm cloud, thick and electric. Thor's eyes scanned the soldiers, his people, once comrades, now standing on the edge of a decision that could change everything. He could feel their fear, their anger. They had been trained to protect Earth, but now they had been led astray. The rogue faction believed that the Iskari were the enemy, and their fear made them desperate enough to strike first. THOR stepped forward, his voice low but unwavering. "This isn't about survival anymore. It's about thinking, about seeing the bigger picture. The Iskari have the power to wipe us out, but they don't want to. They'd want peace, and we have to show them that we're worth trusting." The soldier who had spoken earlier, his name was Captain Hart, THOR recalled, looked unconvinced. "Peace. You really think they'll just roll over because we wave a flag of peace?" "I didn't say they would," Thor replied, his voice hardening. "But I know they won't if we keep pushing them into a corner. The Iskari are ancient, but they're not monsters. They're a people with their own code of honor. They don't want war any more than we do, but we have to prove we're not the enemy." The soldiers murmured, some nodding, others still skeptical. Thor's gaze locked with Captain Hart's. He could see the doubt, the hesitation, but there was something else too, something fragile beneath the surface. The captain wasn't a villain. He was a soldier caught in the middle of a war that hadn't even started yet. "Look, Hart," THOR continued, softer this time. "I'm not asking you to lay down your weapons. I'm asking you to choose. To choose the future we want, instead of the one we're being led into." A moment of silence passed, thick and uncertain, before the captain spoke again. And what if you're wrong? What if this peace talk is just a trap? What if the Askari are planning to wipe us out the moment we turn our backs? THOR took a slow breath, considering the question. It was one he'd asked himself more times than he cared to admit. There were no easy answers, no guarantees. But he couldn't back down now, not when Earth's future was at stake. I'm not asking you to trust them blindly, THOR said, his voice steady. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that I can handle this. I'm going back to the Askari fleet, and I'll make sure that they understand the truth. This isn't about diplomacy for diplomacy's sake. It's about survival. For all of us. Hart hesitated, and for a heartbeat, THOR wondered if he would turn his back on him entirely. But then, the captain lowered his weapon, his shoulders slumping with the weight of a decision made. You're right, Hart muttered, looking around at his comrades. We're human first, and we're not going to let fear tear us apart. THOR felt a wave of relief wash over him. This was the turning point. It wasn't just his fight anymore. This was their fight. Humanity's fight. Behind him, the airlock doors hissed open, and a low mechanical hum filled the room. It was the sound of the base's central defense systems powering up. Alarm systems, prepared for battle. THOR didn't need to look over his shoulder to know what was coming. We don't have much time, he said, turning toward the soldiers. Get to your posts. Prepare to stand down. I'm going to handle this. With a final nod, THOR turned and sprinted toward the control room, his mind already calculating his next move. Every second was a precious commodity now. He had no idea what the Askari would do when they learned of the rogue faction's actions, but he was certain of one thing. He couldn't let them destroy everything. The silence that followed him through the corridors felt like the calm before the storm. As THOR approached the main console, he punched in the coordinates, opening the comms to the Askari fleet. It was time for his final gamble. The hum of the control room was deafening in the stillness. THOR's fingers flew over the console, his mind laser-focused. The rogue faction had launched their attack, and the clock was ticking. If he couldn't stop it, war would break out, an all-out war that would tear humanity apart before it ever had a chance to truly thrive among the stars. The holographic interface flickered in front of him, showing the Askari fleet closing in on their position. The enemy ships were massive, their armor shining darkly against the void of space. THOR's heart pounded, but his hands didn't shake. His mind was clear. He'd faced down death before, but this was something different. This was the fate of humanity. He activated the comms, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. This is Commander THOR Thorson of the United Earth Fleet. I am requesting an audience with the Askari High Command. Now, for a moment, there was only static, the harsh sound of broken transmission. Then finally, a voice came through. Deep, unyielding. It was Valkar. Commander Thorson, the Askari's voice rumbled, full of authority. You are bold to make this request. Do you not understand that your people have provoked us? THOR's jaw clenched. The weight of the situation pressed down on him harder with every passing second. But there was no room for fear now. Only resolve. I understand, he said, his voice unwavering. And I'm here to fix it. Your fleet is prepared to attack. But I'm not asking you to forgive what's been done. I'm asking you to listen. There was a long pause before Valkar responded. Listen, you are a Terran, and you come to us in your time of need. Yet it is your people who have threatened everything we have worked to protect. The alien's tone was cold, but THOR could detect something else, a flicker of doubt, a hint of curiosity. I know the truth, THOR said, his eyes scanning the room as he spoke. There are factions on Earth that see the Askari as a threat, but that's not the whole of humanity. I'm asking you to see us. To see me. We're not the enemy. The enemy is the fear and paranoia that has infected both our worlds. But I won't let it tear us apart. THOR's words hung in the air, heavier than any weapon he had ever wielded. It was a gamble. a desperate one, but it was the only shot he had left. Another pause. The tension in the room was unbearable. Then Valkar spoke again, quieter this time. "You believe that one voice can change the course of the universe, Commander. Your voice? Or do you believe it is the voices of your people that will guide this ship away from destruction?" THOR took a breath, his eyes narrowing with determination. "I believe in humanity, in its ability to rise above its mistakes. I've seen it before, on the battlefield, in the faces of the soldiers I've fought alongside. And I know I'm not the only one who believes we can find a way forward." The silence that followed was almost deafening. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, finally, Valkar's voice crackled over the comms once more somber now. "You will have your audience, but understand this, THOR. Your fate, and the fate of your people, rests in your hands. Do not fail us." The transmission cut out, leaving THOR standing alone in the control room, his heart still racing. The moment of truth had come. As the door to the room slid open, THOR squared his shoulders. He knew what he had to do, but he also knew that the next few minutes could determine the future of everything he had fought for. The fate of humanity. He stepped forward, taking one final breath before the next battle began, not with weapons or blood, but with the power of his words, and the weight of his people's hopes on his shoulders. The Iskari flagship loomed before THOR, its massive hull gleaming in the blackness of space. As he stepped onto the bridge, the air was thick with the tension of thousands of years of history, ancient, proud, and unyielding. The towering figures of the Iskari High Command stood in front of him, their eyes burning with suspicion and raw authority. They were a race that had seen it all, survived the worst, and thrived amidst the chaos of the universe. But now, they faced something entirely new. A Terran, a human. THOR's pulse was steady, his mind clear, but the enormity of the moment threatened to overwhelm him. He stood before Valkar, the High Commander of the Iskari, whose 8-foot frame cast a long shadow across the room. The alien's deep crimson eyes fixed on him with an intensity that could have shattered lesser men. "You asked for an audience," Valkar's voice boomed, a deep rumble that resonated in THOR's chest. "You come to us, Terran, after your people have broken the first rule of diplomacy. Attack first, talk later. What could you possibly offer that would change the course of this war?" THOR squared his shoulders, fighting the weight of history pressing down on him. "I offer the truth," he said, his voice steady. "Humanity isn't your enemy. We've made mistakes, just as you have. But we are capable of more than just violence. We can build, we can unite, and we can work together if you'll give us the chance." Valkar's eyes narrowed, but there was something in them now, something other than anger, perhaps curiosity, perhaps doubt. "You think you can change the course of centuries of tradition with words?" Valkar asked, stepping closer. "Do you think your voice, one human voice, can make us forget the threat your people represent?" THOR's chest tightened, but he didn't waver. "No," he said quietly, "but I believe in humanity. I believe we can rise above our mistakes. I believe we can be a force for good in this galaxy. And I believe that the Iskari aren't the monsters you think we are. I've fought with my people, side by side. I know what we're capable of. But I also know that if we continue down this path, there won't be anything left, for either of us." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The bridge was still, and even the great alien warships outside seemed to hold their breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. Finally, Valkar spoke again, his voice quieter, but no less commanding. "Your words are intriguing, Terran, but you speak of unity and peace as if they can be achieved with a simple plea. What makes you think we can trust you, or any human?" THOR's eyes hardened. "Because I'm here, alone, not with an army or weapons, but with the truth of what I believe. My people have made their mistakes, but we want to do better, if you'll give us the chance." Valkar was silent for a long time, his gaze piercing. The weight of the moment seemed to stretch on forever. Then, the alien commander turned his head slightly, his eyes shifting to the rest of the high command. They watched, silent and unmoving, as if waiting for something, waiting for Valkar to make the final decision. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Then, finally, Valkar's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Very well. You have given us your truth, and we will give you a chance to prove it." THOR felt his heart skip a beat, but he held himself steady. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. Valkar stepped back, and the tension in the room began to ebb, ever so slightly. "But understand this, Terran," Valkar said, his voice low and resonant. "This is your last chance. If your people fail us again, there will be no peace. There will be only destruction." THOR nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I will make sure my people do." As he turned to leave the bridge, the weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, heavy but not crushing. There was still work to be done, still a long road ahead. But as he walked through the airlock and into the cold vastness of space, THOR knew that humanity had one chance, one fleeting moment, to prove its worth. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for their place in the stars. And they wouldn't go down without a fight.